The mining drill stopped. Foreman Cass pressed his ear to the metal housing. Nothing. Just the hum of the ventilation system and his own breathing. 20 meters below, in the darkness of Shaft 7, something had gone wrong. Martinez, status report. Static crackled through the comm. Then silence. Cass wiped sweat from his forehead. The air tasted metallic. Wrong. Like copper pennies dissolving on his tongue. He'd been mining asteroids for 15 years. He knew when equipment failed. This wasn't equipment failure. The elevator cage descended into blackness. Emergency lights cast sickly yellow pools every 10 meters. His boots clanged against the metal grating. At level 7, the smell hit him first. Ozone. Burned circuits. And something else. Something ancient. The tunnel stretched ahead, carved perfectly smooth. Too smooth. The rock walls gleamed like polished obsidian, reflecting his helmet light in impossible angles. Martinez? Chen? Anyone? His voice echoed strangely. The sound seemed to bend, twist, return to him changed. Then he saw the bodies, 3 miners, perfectly preserved. No wounds, no blood. They stood frozen mid-step, tools still gripped in their hands. Their eyes were open, staring at nothing. Cass reached for Martinez's shoulder. The skin was cold, marble cold. But the man was still breathing. Slow, mechanical breaths that misted in the suddenly frigid air. Behind them, the tunnel wall had changed. What had been solid rock was now a doorway. Seamless metal stretched into darkness beyond. Green light pulsed from within, casting everything in an alien glow. The light pulsed like a heartbeat. Cass stepped closer. The metal was covered in symbols, hieroglyphs that hurt to look at. They seemed to move when he wasn't looking directly at them. A sound echoed from the depths. Footsteps. Metal on stone. Measured, deliberate, getting closer, Cass grabbed his comm unit. Control, this is Shaft 7. We have a situation. We've broken through into something that was already here. The footsteps stopped. In the green glow, a shadow moved. Tall, impossibly tall. With eyes that burned like dying stars, Cass realized with crystal clarity that they hadn't found an archaeological site. They'd found a tomb. And something inside had been waiting 65 million years to wake up. But what emerged from that darkness would make their worst nightmares seem like children's bedtime stories. In the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, humanity spreads across 1 million worlds like seeds scattered in poisoned soil. Each colony believes itself safe. Each settlement trusts in the Emperor's protection. But beneath their feet, older things sleep. For 65 million years, the Necrons have waited in tomb worlds, buried deep beneath planetary crusts. Ancient beyond human comprehension, these skeletal automatons once ruled the galaxy when mankind's ancestors were still learning to make fire. They are death incarnate, living metal given malevolent purpose. When a human world is built unknowingly above a Necron tomb complex, it becomes a countdown timer to extinction. Every foundation dug, every mine shaft carved, every deep well drilled brings the sleepers closer to waking. The humans above go about their lives, farming, trading, raising children, building futures. They name their streets and celebrate harvests, never knowing they've built their civilization on top of a graveyard that predates their species. This is the story of Tertius Minor, an agricultural world in the Segmentum Solar. Population 4.7 million souls. 3 weeks ago, it was just another imperial colony. Wheat fields stretched golden under twin suns. Children played in dusty streets while their parents worked the processing plants. The air smelled of grain and honest sweat. But Tertius Minor held a secret buried 3 kilometers beneath its fertile soil. A tomb complex the size of a continent, filled with legions of deathless warriors waiting for the right vibration, the right disturbance, to trigger their ancient awakening protocols. The colonists had been digging deeper lately. The population was growing. They needed more water, more minerals, more space for their expanding civilization. Every shovel of earth brought them closer to something that should have stayed buried. This isn't just a story about alien invasion. It's about the arrogance of settlement, the hubris of expansion, the terrible price of building your future on someone else's grave. It's about what happens when the dead refuse to stay dead, when ancient grudges wake up hungry, when sleeping gods open their eyes and remember why they went to war in the first place. 3 weeks ago, a mining team on Tertius Minor made a discovery that would doom their world. They thought they'd found salvation. But what they did next would wake something that had been dreaming of revenge since before Earth's sun was born. Mining foreman Cale Thorne had worked the deep shafts of Tertius Prime for 37 years. He knew every sound the planet made. The groaning of tectonic plates, the whisper of atmospheric processors, the steady thrum of excavation engines carving wealth from stone. But this morning, something new echoed from Shaft 7, a resonance, metallic, ancient. Cale descended into darkness, his headlamp cutting through air thick with dust and dread. The temperature dropped with each step. His breath misted. Frost began forming on the tunnel walls despite the geothermal heating. Something was wrong with the rock itself. The excavation team had been mining here for weeks, following a rich vein of promethium deep into the planet's crust. Standard procedure, standard depth, standard everything, except for the metal. It wasn't supposed to be there. Tertius Prime was a young world, geologically speaking. No ancient civilizations, no archaeological significance, just rock and ore and the promise of imperial profit. Yet there it was, a wall of impossible black metal, seamless and cold, stretching beyond the reach of their lights. The excavation lasers had barely scratched its surface. The metals seemed to absorb energy, drinking in their cutting beams like a starving thing. Cale pressed his palm against the surface. The metal was warm. No, not warm. Alive, a pulse traveled through the wall. Slow, rhythmic, like a heartbeat that had been sleeping for 65 million years. Foreman. Came Vasquez's voice through the comm, tight with fear. The seismic readings are off the charts. Something's moving down there. Something big. Kyle pulled his hand away. Where his palm had touched, the metal began to glow. Green light seeped through hairline cracks that hadn't been there moments before. The pulse quickened, and the wall was waking up. Evacuate the shaft, Kyle whispered into his comm. All personnel, surface immediately. But even as he spoke, he knew they were too late. The green light spread like infection through the metal. The pulse became a rhythm. The rhythm became a song. And in that song, Cale heard something that made his blood freeze. Recognition. Whatever lay behind this wall knew they were here, had been waiting for them, had been calling to them through dreams and excavation reports and the irresistible lure of easy profit. The first crack split the air like thunder. But the real horror hadn't even begun. Governor Marcus Thorne stands in his command center, watching the hollow displays flicker with impossible readings. The metal beneath his feet vibrates with a frequency that makes his teeth ache. 3 million souls depend on his next decision. The astropath's message burns in his mind like acid. Ancient Xenos awakening. Planet-wide threat imminent. Recommend immediate evacuation. But evacuation ships take weeks to arrive. The nearest Imperial fleet is fighting orcs 2 sectors away. The cold mathematics are simple and terrifying. Thorn's aide, Lieutenant Vex, hovers near the tactical display. Her pale face reflects the green glow of seismic sensors. "Sir, the tremors are increasing. Whatever's down there, it's moving." The governor's weathered hands grip the command rail. 40 years of service, border wars, pirate raids, chaos cults. He's seen humanity's enemies before. But this feels different. This feels final. "Show me the excavation site again," he orders. The main screen shifts to orbital surveillance. The mining complex looks like a wound in the planet's flesh. Steam rises from the depths where his people accidentally breached something that should have stayed buried. Something that predates humanity by millions of years. Vex's voice cracks slightly. The miners who escaped, they keep talking about green lights, moving metal, voices that aren't voices. Thorn closes his eyes. In the darkness behind his lids, he sees faces. His daughter in the capital Hab block, the factory workers in Sector 7, children playing in the agricultural domes, all of them trusting him to keep them safe. "Options, Lieutenant. We could try to seal the breach, collapse the tunnels with seismic charges. And if that doesn't work?" Silence stretches between them like a taut wire. The answer hangs unspoken in the recycled air. Thorn opens his eyes. On the screen, something glints in the excavation's depths. A flicker of emerald light that pulses like a heartbeat, like something waking up. "Sir," Vex whispers. Long-range augers are detecting massive energy signatures. Multiple locations across the planet. It's not just the mining site. The governor's blood turns to ice water. How many locations? 17 confirmed. More appearing every hour. Thorn stares at the tactical display as red warning icons bloom across the planetary map like a disease. Each one marks a tomb. Each tomb holds horrors beyond human comprehension. His hand hovers over the emergency broadcast controls. But then the lights go out. Captain Marcus Voss had seen death before. Orc invasions, chaos cultist uprisings, even the dreaded Tyrannid swarms. But nothing had prepared him for this. The air itself seemed to scream as the first Necron warrior raised its weapon. The Gauss flare hummed with ancient malevolence, green energy crackling along its obsidian barrel like captured lightning. Private Jensen stood 20 meters away, his laser gun trembling in sweating hands. The boy couldn't be older than 19, fresh from the agri-world of Tertius Prime. The Necron's optical sensors locked onto him with mechanical precision. "Jensen, move!" Marcus roared. Too late. The Gauss flare discharged with a sound like reality tearing. A beam of sickly emerald light lanced across the plaza, striking Jensen's center mass. What happened next defied every law of nature Marcus understood. Jensen didn't simply die. He began to unravel. The molecular bonds holding his body together started dissolving from the point of impact outward. Skin peeled away in perfect strips, revealing muscle beneath. Then the muscle itself began to separate, fiber by fiber, like a tapestry being methodically unwoven. Jensen's scream started human. It ended as something else entirely as his vocal cords disintegrated mid-cry. The smell hit Marcus first. Ozone and copper, mixed with something that reminded him of burning plastic. Then came the sound, a wet, crackling noise like bacon in a pan, but wrong. So terribly wrong. Jensen's eyes remained conscious throughout the entire process. Marcus could see the terror there, the desperate confusion as the boy watched his own hands dissolve into constituent atoms. The process took exactly 12 seconds. When it finished, nothing remained but a perfect outline of ash on the rockcrete floor. Even Jensen's equipment had been reduced to its component elements: iron, carbon, silicon, all neatly separated into small, precise piles. The Necron warrior tilted its skull-like head, studying its handiwork with the detached interest of a craftsman examining a finished piece. Around the plaza, Marcus heard his men beginning to break. Sergeant Torres was vomiting against a hab-block wall. Corporal Hayes had dropped his weapon entirely, staring at the ash outline with glassy eyes. The Necron's optical sensors swept the area, seeking its next target. Marcus realized with growing horror that this wasn't warfare. This was an extermination protocol, and they had just witnessed the most merciful death the Necrons would offer. But what emerged from the tomb entrance next made the Gauss flare seem like a blessing. Governor Marcus Vex stared at the holographic display floating above his command table. The blue light cast shadows across his weathered face as casualty reports scrolled endlessly upward. 16 million dead in the first 3 hours. The scent of recycled air mixed with the metallic tang of fear sweat from his officers. Outside the reinforced windows of the planetary capital, green lightning split the sky where Necron Gauss weapons carved through fleeing transport ships. "Sir, we have confirmation from Hive Tertius," his aide whispered, voice cracking. "The entire population. Gone. Not killed. Gone. Like they never existed." Vex's hands trembled as he reached for the red communicator. The device felt impossibly heavy. One call would summon the Imperial Navy's Exterminatus fleet. One word would turn his world into molten glass, but it would also kill the 47 billion people still alive. The temperature in the command center dropped as another Necron tomb ship breached the atmosphere. Frost began forming on the windows. His breath came out in visible puffs as he watched entire city blocks simply vanish. "Governor." Admiral Korath's voice crackled through the Vox. "We're holding position in the outer system, awaiting your authorization for planetary sterilization." Vex closed his eyes. Behind his lids, he saw his daughter's face. She was somewhere in Hive Secundus with her children, his grandchildren. Through the speakers came the sound that would haunt him forever, the mechanical dirge of awakening Necron warriors. 1 billion metal feet marching in perfect synchronization. The sound of inevitability. "Sir?" His aide placed a shaking hand on his shoulder. "The Necrons have reached the outer districts. They're not killing everyone. They're harvesting them, converting them." Vex opened his eyes and looked at the tactical display. Green dots spread like a plague across the map. Each dot represented 1,000 souls being transformed into something else. Something that would serve the Necron dynasties for eternity. His finger hovered over the authorization button. Save the galaxy by murdering his world, or let the Necrons turn 47 billion humans into their eternal servants. The metal footsteps grew louder, closer. Outside, the screaming had stopped. That silence was somehow worse than any sound. Vex pressed the button. But when the Exterminatus fleet fired their cyclonic torpedoes, something impossible happened. The tremors had been building for 3 days across Tertius Prime, deep beneath the deep mining colonies. Something ancient stirred. Governor Valdris pressed his palm against the command center's reinforced glass. The vibrations traveled up through his bones, a rhythm that felt almost deliberate. "Sir, seismic readings are off the charts," his aide whispered. "The epicenter is directly under Sector 7. Sector 7. Where they'd been mining that strange black stone. The stone that hummed. Suddenly the tremors stopped. complete silence. Valdris felt his heart hammering against his ribs. Outside, even the wind had died. The mining equipment sat motionless. Workers stood frozen, tools hanging limp in their hands. Then the ground split open, not cracked, split, like reality itself was tearing along invisible seams. From the fissures came a light that hurt to look at. Cold, green, wrong. It painted everything in sickly hues, turning human skin corpse pale. Valdris watched through his scope as geometric structures began rising from the earth. Pyramids of living metal, their surfaces flowing like mercury but harder than diamond. Ancient hieroglyphs pulsed along their flanks, telling stories in a language that predated humanity by 60 million years. The Necron tomb complex was awakening. Level by level, chamber by chamber, the buried city revealed itself. Structures that defied physics, folded outward from impossible angles. Corridors that seemed to stretch infinitely inward while remaining perfectly contained. And from every opening came the sound. A mechanical humming that burrowed into human skulls. Workers in Sector 7 began clutching their heads, screaming. Some collapsed, blood trickling from their ears. Valdris grabbed his Voxcaster. All units, fall back to the perimeter. Evacuate Sector 7 immediately. But his words felt hollow, because he could see them now. Silhouettes moving within the green glow. Tall, skeletal figures with eyes like burning coals. They moved with perfect synchronization, emerging from their 60-million-year slumber with terrifying purpose. The Necrons weren't just awakening. They were remembering. Remembering this world had once been theirs. Remembering the Great Sleep. Remembering why they had chosen this particular planet for their tomb. And remembering what they did to trespassers. Valdris felt ice spreading through his veins as more tomb complexes began erupting across the planet's surface. Dozens of them. Hundreds. How long had humanity been building cities on top of sleeping gods? The first Necron warrior stepped fully into the daylight, its skeletal frame wreathed in eldritch energy. It turned its burning gaze toward the human settlements. Then it began to walk. But what happened next would make every human on Tertius Prime question everything they thought they knew about death. Commander Voss watched his plasma cannons fire into the advancing wall of metal. The superheated energy that could melt through tank armor simply dissipated, like throwing water at a mountain. Direct hit confirmed. His gunner reported, voice cracking. No damage detected. The Necron warriors didn't even slow down. Their Gauss weapons hummed with ancient malice, green lightning dancing between skeletal fingers. Voss had seen Imperial Guard regiments reduced to atoms by these weapons. Watched proud space marines dissolve layer by layer, screaming as their very molecules came apart. But now, he understood the true horror. It wasn't just that human weapons couldn't hurt them. The Necrons were allowing the humans to fire, letting them waste ammunition, watching them realize their helplessness. Sir, the last cannons aren't even scratching their paint, Sergeant Kane whispered through the Vox. Paint, as if these ancient killing machines needed aesthetics. The temperature dropped 20 degrees as more Necrons phased into reality. Their living metal bodies reformed from quantum mist, wounds healing instantly. Voss smelled ozone and burnt copper. The taste of fear coating his tongue like acid. His most advanced targeting systems couldn't even lock onto them properly. The machine spirits in his weapons were screaming in binary terror, recognizing something older than the Imperium itself. Fall back to secondary positions, he ordered. But there was nowhere to run. The Necrons had been fighting wars when humanity was still discovering fire. Their technology was so advanced, it seemed like magic to Imperial engineers. Self-repairing armor that existed partially outside reality. Weapons that unraveled matter at the subatomic level. Shields that turned kinetic energy into harmless light. Voss watched a Necron warrior walk through a wall of lasgun fire. Each beam simply bent around its form, deflected by fields that humanity couldn't even detect, let alone understand. The sound of metal feet on rockcrete echoed through the command bunker. Steady, inevitable, like a countdown to extinction. "How do you fight gods?" Kane whispered. The question hung in the recycled air, mixing with the smell of overheating weapons and human sweat. Voss checked his chronometer. They'd been firing for 17 minutes straight. Enough firepower to level a city block, 0 Necron casualties. The green glow was getting brighter now. Closer. And then Voss realized something that made his blood freeze. The Necrons weren't just immune to their weapons, they were learning from them. Deep beneath Kepler Prime's surface, something ancient stirs. The mining drill penetrates the final layer of bedrock. Sparks cascade down the shaft like dying stars. The air tastes of ozone and metal. Foreman Marcus Voss watches the drill head disappear into darkness. His crew cheers. Another quota met, but the hole doesn't echo back. Instead, a low hum rises from the depths. Not mechanical, organic, like breathing. The drill stops spinning. "Cut power," Marcus orders. His voice cracks. The hum continues. Growing stronger, 20 meters below, green light begins to seep through hairline cracks in the tunnel walls. The stone itself seems to pulse. Ancient. Circuitry awakens after 65 million years of sleep. The Necron tomb complex stretches for kilometers beneath the human settlement. Massive halls filled with silent warriors. Waiting, the first awakening protocol activates. Canoptek scarabs emerge from hidden alcoves. Their metal legs click against stone as they scuttle toward the breach. Each one the size of a human torso. Sensors sweep the tunnel, analyzing the intruders above. Data streams through quantum networks. Unknown life forms detected. Primitive technology, organic composition, the scarabs transmit their findings to deeper chambers. In the central crypt, a Necron lord's eyes flicker to life. Green fire burns in empty sockets. Consciousness returns like acid through dead synapses. Memories surface. The war in heaven. The Citan's betrayal. The great sleep, and now, awakening. The Lord's finger twitches. Servo motors whine as ancient joints move for the first time in millennia. Black metal fingers close into a fist. Above, Marcus feels the ground vibrate beneath his boots. The hum becomes a roar. "Everyone back," he shouts. Too late, the tunnel walls explode outward. Green lightning arcs through the air. The scarabs pour upward like a metallic tide. The first miner they reach simply stops. His screams cut short. His flesh begins to dissolve. Flensing protocols engage. Within seconds, only bones remain. Then the bones crumble to dust. The scarabs move to the next target. Marcus runs. Behind him, his crew dies in ways that defy comprehension. Their matter converted to energy. Their souls harvested. He reaches the surface as alarms begin wailing across Kepler Prime. Emergency lights bathe the colony in red, but in the distance, a different light grows stronger. Green fire rises from fissures in the earth. The Necrons are awakening, and they remember what humans are for. But the real horror hadn't even begun. The first humans to die never saw their killers coming. Maria Santos was hanging laundry when the air itself seemed to shimmer. The wet fabric in her hands suddenly felt heavier, colder. She turned toward the distortion, just as reality tore open. A figure materialized from nothing. Skeletal metal wrapped in shadows and green fire. Its eye sockets burned with ancient hatred as it raised a weapon that hummed with impossible energies. Maria's scream died in her throat. The Gauss flare's beam touched her chest and she simply unraveled, molecule by molecule, atom by atom. Her husband found only empty clothes still swaying in the morning breeze. Across New Carthage, the pattern repeated. Silent, surgical, merciless. Necron warriors phased through walls like living nightmares. Their footsteps made no sound on ceramic floors. Their breathing created no mist in the cold morning air, because they didn't breathe at all. 10-year-old Jakob was playing with toy soldiers when his bedroom wall dissolved. A Necron immortal stepped through, its scarab skull face tilting as it studied the child. Jakob's plastic warriors scattered across the floor. Imperial Guard, Space Marines, heroes from the stories. None of them could save him now. The Immortal's Tesla carbine charged with crackling energy. Lightning danced between its skeletal fingers as Jakob pressed himself against the far wall. "Mama," he whispered. The weapon fired. Blue electricity consumed everything. In the industrial district, Foreman Chen was checking the morning shift roster when his workers simply vanished. One moment they were there, laughing, complaining about overtime, drinking recaf. The next moment, only their uniforms remained. Chen's hands shook as he activated the emergency vox. Static answered him. Always static. The communication arrays had been the first targets. Cut the throat before the body knows it's dying. Governor Castellan was still asleep when his bodyguards evaporated around his bed. He woke to find skeletal figures standing in his chambers like metal angels of death. Their leader, a Necron lord with a crown of living darkness, spoke in a voice like grinding tombstones. "Your species has trespassed long enough." Castellan reached for his last pistol. His hand passed through empty air where the weapon should have been. The Necron lord's eyes flared brighter. This world remembers its true masters. Outside, the harvest accelerated. Entire city blocks fell silent as the Necrons moved through them like a plague of living metal. No alarm sounded. No distress signals escaped. New Carthage was dying one soul at a time. But in the depths of the Undercity, something the Necrons hadn't expected was stirring. Something that had been waiting 60 million years for exactly this moment. Governor Thaddeus Vex stared at the tactical display, his hands trembling against the cold metal console. The green dots representing his cities were winking out one by one. Each dot was 1,000,000 souls. The Necron advance had accelerated beyond all projections. Tomb complexes across 3 continents had awakened simultaneously, disgorging legions of living metal that moved with terrifying coordination. His aide, Colonel Marsh, cleared her throat. "Sir, we have confirmation. The orbital defense platforms are offline. The Necrons, they're using some kind of electromagnetic pulse that turns our own technology against us." Vex could smell the acrid smoke drifting through the command bunker's ventilation. Outside, the Capitol burned. The screams had stopped an hour ago. That silence was worse than any sound. How long until the evacuation ships arrive? His voice cracked like old parchment. 18 hours, sir. Maybe 20. The governor's stomach dropped. On the display, Necron forces were 12 hours from the capital. The mathematics were brutal and simple. Marsh stepped closer, her face pale in the green glow of the tactical screens. "Sir, there is another option." Vex knew what she meant. The Exterminatus Protocol. One word to the Imperial Navy, and cyclonic torpedoes would crack the planet's crust. Every human would die, but so would the Necrons. The tomb worlds would be sealed forever. 15 billion people lived on Kronos Prime. His daughter was among them, trapped in the southern hive cities where Necron flayers had begun their grisly harvest. The reports spoke of humans skinned alive, their flesh worn like grotesque trophies by the mechanical horrors. The Astartes are requesting immediate extraction, Marsh continued. They say the planet is lost. They want to preserve their gene seed for future campaigns. Vex closed his eyes. He could feel the weight of every soul on his shoulders, pressing down like a mountain of lead. The Necrons didn't just kill. They harvested. They turned the living into batteries for their endless war machines. But to murder an entire world to stop them. Governor. Marsh's voice was barely a whisper. The Navy is requesting confirmation. Do we authorize Exterminatus? Thaddeus Vex opened his eyes and looked at the tactical display one final time. The green tide was spreading like a cancer across his world. He reached for the Vox transmitter, but then the bunker's lights flickered and something metallic scraped against the blast doors above. The screaming stopped at 0347 hours. Governor Thane pressed his face against the reinforced glass of his command bunker, watching his world die in perfect silence. Where New Carthage had sprawled across the valley floor 12 hours ago, geometric patterns of black metal now carved the earth into alien mathematics. The Necrons weren't just killing his people. They were erasing them. Sir, the orbital scans. Lieutenant Voss's voice cracked like breaking ice. The entire continental shelf is shifting. They're not just awakening. They're rebuilding. Thane's breath fogged the glass as he watched silver figures glide through streets that no longer existed. The Necrons moved with mechanical precision, their Gauss weapons dissolving human architecture molecule by molecule. But this wasn't destruction. This was reclamation. How long? Thane whispered. The geological surveys suggest, sir, this world was never ours. The human settlements, the cities, the farmlands. We built everything on top of their tomb complexes. We've been living on a graveyard for 3,000 years. The temperature in the bunker dropped 10 degrees as the truth settled like lead in their stomachs. Every human footstep had been trespass. Every building, violation. Every birth, an insult to the sleeping dead. Outside, the Necron constructs worked with terrifying efficiency. Monoliths rose from the earth like black teeth, their surfaces crawling with hieroglyphs that hurt to look at. The very air shimmered with energies that made human DNA weep. The children in Sector 7, Voss said, his voice barely audible. They're not killing them. Thane's blood turned to ice water. What? The bioscanners show life signs, but changed, altered. The Necrons are doing something to them, something that makes them stop being human. The implications crashed over Thane like a collapsing building. The Necrons weren't just reclaiming their tomb world. They were perfecting it. And humanity wasn't being exterminated. They were being improved. A new sound echoed through the bunker's walls, not the harsh whine of Gauss weapons, but something worse. Something that sounded almost like singing, if machines could dream of music. Thane turned to face his remaining officers, their faces pale as bone in the emergency lighting. Outside, the geometric patterns were spreading faster now, racing toward their bunker like hungry shadows. Sir, Voss whispered, staring at his scanner. The patterns, they're not random. They're following the old survey maps. the ones from the initial colonization. Thane felt his sanity crack like thin ice. But the real horror hadn't even begun. The first Necron Lord rises from its sarcophagus like a nightmare given form. Metal sinews creak with the weight of 60 million years. Green fire ignites behind skeletal eye sockets, casting dancing shadows across tomb walls carved with the screaming faces of the devoured. This is Overlord Zarek the Infinite, once mortal, once flesh. Now something far worse. The air tastes of copper and ozone as his consciousness fully awakens. Each thought burns through quantum processors that have calculated the deaths of entire star systems. His first sensation isn't hunger or rage, it's disappointment. These creatures. His voice resonates through Vox grills, each word dripping with ancient contempt. They dare to walk upon our sacred ground? Above, the human colonists continue their morning routines. Children laugh in schoolyards. Farmers tend their crops. They have no idea that gods of death are stirring beneath their feet. Zarek's skeletal fingers trace hieroglyphs that pulse with malevolent energy. Each symbol tells a story of conquest, of worlds stripped bare, of species reduced to cosmic dust. But something has changed during the Great Sleep. The tomb's monitoring systems show him visions of the surface world. Humans building cities where once stood monuments to Necron glory. Humans laughing where once echoed the death screams of the Citan's feast. His rage should be absolute. His vengeance swift and merciless. Instead, Zarek pauses. For in these human faces, he sees something that strikes him like a blade through his mechanical heart. He sees what he once was, what his people once were before they traded flesh for cold metal immortality. These humans possess what the Necrons lost forever in their pact with Star God's souls. Fascinating, he whispers, his voice now carrying an edge of something unexpected. Not hatred, but hunger of a different kind. Perhaps these cattle serve a purpose after all. Other tomb lords begin their awakening sequences. Ancient protocols activate. War machines that could crack continents stir in their alcoves. But Zarek raises one skeletal hand. No, he commands. Not yet. These humans, they may prove useful. Their souls burn so brightly, so purely. His mechanical jaw splits in what might once have been a smile. We shall study them first, learn their ways, their fears, their hopes. The tomb fills with the sound of awakening death. And then we shall take everything they are. But the real horror hadn't even begun. Commander Valdris stared at the tactical display, watching red icons multiply across Kepler Prime's surface. Each blinking light represented 1,000 dead Imperial citizens. The Vox crackled with desperate pleas from scattered guard units. Static-filled screams, then silence. Sir, we've lost contact with the 47th Armored, Lieutenant Caney reported, his voice hollow. That's the 3rd Regiment in 2 hours. Valdris felt the weight of command crushing down like a tomb lid. His fingers traced the cold metal of his Aquila pendant. Through the command bunker's reinforced windows, green lightning split the sky. The Necron tomb ships rose like metallic mountains, their hulls gleaming with malevolent purpose. The air tasted of ozone and fear. What about orbital support? Valdris asked, though he already knew the answer. Caney's face went pale. The Retribution and Sword of Terra. They're gone, sir. The Necron ships tore through our fleet like paper. Valdris closed his eyes. 3 battleships, 12,000 souls. Reduced to debris in minutes, the bunker shuddered as Summitus. Hing Massive moved overhead. Dust rained from the ceiling like ash from a crematorium. Sir, A tech priest's mechanical voice cut through the chaos. Long-range auspex shows Necron forces converging on all major population centers. Estimated casualties: 17 million and rising. 17 million, and Valdris had sworn an oath to protect these people. Had promised their children safety behind Imperial walls. Now those walls were dust. Orders, sir? Caney's question hung in the recycled air like a death sentence. Valdris looked at his remaining officers. Young faces marked by desperation. They still believed their commander could save them. But the truth burned in his chest like acid. The Imperium's mighty war machine was breaking apart. Their tanks melted under Goth's fire. Their aircraft fell like broken birds. The Necrons weren't just winning. They were erasing humanity's presence from Kepler Prime with surgical precision. "Sir, incoming transmission," the Vox operator called out. It's from the Necrons themselves." The chamber fell silent except for the hum of dying machines. Valdris straightened his uniform one last time. Whatever message awaited would seal their fate. Put it through. The speakers crackled to life, and a voice spoke. Not human, not alive, but the words it spoke changed everything. Governor Tertius Vex stood in his command bunker, watching the holographic display flicker with dying light. Across the planet's surface, red dots vanished one by one. Each dot represented a city. Each city held millions of souls. The metallic taste of recycled air filled his mouth as he contemplated the unthinkable. "Sir, we've lost contact with Hive Tertius," his aide whispered, voice cracking. That's 40 million people." Vex's weathered hands trembled as he reached for the crimson activation key hanging around his neck. The Exterminatus Protocol, the ultimate sanction that would reduce his entire world to molten slag. Better a dead world than a Necron world. The bunker's walls vibrated with distant thunder. But this wasn't weather. This was the sound of Goth's weapons systematically dismantling reality itself, molecule by molecule. The Necrons weren't just killing his people, they were unmaking them. "How long until the fleet arrives?" Vex asked, though he already knew the answer. 72 hours, sir. Minimum 72 hours. The planet wouldn't last 72 minutes. Vex closed his eyes, feeling the weight of 11 billion lives pressing down on his shoulders. His daughter lived in Hive Secundus. His grandchildren played in its gardens just yesterday, their laughter echoing through corridors now filled with screaming metal. The activation key felt impossibly heavy in his palm. "Sir," another voice called out, urgent and breathless. "We're receiving a transmission. It's from the Necrons themselves." Vex's blood turned to ice. The Necrons didn't communicate. They simply harvested. Put it through. The speakers crackled with static, then cleared to reveal something that shouldn't exist. A voice. Mechanical, yes, but unmistakably intelligent. Unmistakably amused. "Governor Vex. I am Overlord Zandrek of the Mefrit dynasty. I have a proposition for you." The holographic display shifted, showing detailed schematics of the orbital defense platforms. Information the Necrons shouldn't possess. Couldn't possess. "Your people interest me, Governor. Their terror is exquisite. I propose a game. Evacuate one Hive city of your choosing. I will allow them to live. The rest, well, they will serve a greater purpose." Vex's aide stared at him, horror written across her young face. "Sir, surely you can't be considering—" "Choose quickly, Governor. My patience has limits, and my immortals grow restless." The transmission cut to static. Vex looked at the Exterminatus key, then at the tactical display showing his world's remaining population centers. 11 billion souls, and he could save perhaps 100 million. But what they did next shocked even the Imperium. Governor Thaddeus Vex watched from his palace balcony as black pyramids tore through the morning sky above Tertius Prime. The air tasted of ozone and burnt metal. Each monolith moved with impossible silence, casting shadows that seemed to devour light itself. "Sir, the Vox networks are dead," his aide whispered, voice cracking. Every communication relay just stopped. Vex gripped the marble railing until his knuckles went white. 40 million souls lived on this world. 40 million Imperial citizens who looked to him for protection. The first monolith settled over the capital's cathedral district with the weight of a falling mountain. Stone cracked, windows shattered in perfect spirals. The ancient bells that had rung for 3,000 years fell silent forever. In the streets below, citizens pointed skyward with the wonder of children watching fireworks. They didn't understand yet. How could they? The Imperium had kept them ignorant of the true horrors lurking in the galaxy's dark corners, my lord. The aide's voice barely registered above the growing hum that seemed to emanate from the monoliths themselves. "The Planetary Defense Force is requesting orders." Vex almost laughed. Orders? What orders could he give against this? His finest regiments possessed lasguns and faith. The enemy wielded technology that predated humanity's first steps into the void. A second monolith descended over the industrial sector. Green lightning arced between its obsidian surfaces, and every machine within a kilometer radius simply stopped. Factory workers stumbled from their shifts into streets suddenly plunged into medieval darkness. The temperature dropped 10 degrees in as many seconds. Vex's breath misted as he watched a third monolith position itself above the spaceport. No ships would leave Tertius Prime today, or ever again. "Sir." The aide's hand trembled as he held the Voxcaster. "The Defense Force commanders are still waiting," Vex turned from the balcony, his face carved from stone. In his 40 years of Imperial service, he'd faced orc invasions, chaos cults, and tyrannid splinter fleets. But this felt different. Final. The monoliths weren't weapons of conquest. They were tombstones. "Tell them to pray," he said quietly. "Tell them to make peace with the Emperor." The aide stared at him with wide, uncomprehending eyes. "Sir, I don't understand." Then the monoliths began to sing. The sound cut through stone and steel and bone, a harmony older than human civilization. Every soul on Tertius Prime heard it simultaneously, felt it vibrating in their teeth and skulls. And in that moment, 40 million people finally understood what was coming for them. Governor Thane pressed his face against the reinforced glass of the command bunker. The sky above Meridian Prime had turned the color of old blood. Green lightning crackled between massive tomb ships that hung like metallic vultures over his world. Each vessel stretched for kilometers, their hulls carved with hieroglyphs that hurt to look at directly. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy buildups across their entire fleet," whispered Communications Officer Vex, her voice barely audible over the growing electrical hum that seemed to emanate from the very air itself. Thane could taste copper on his tongue. The static charge made his skin crawl. Then the first Gauss beam struck. A pillar of emerald fire punched through the atmosphere, connecting sky to earth in one perfect, terrible line. Where it touched the industrial district, matter simply ceased, not destroyed, not vaporized, erased. The beam swept sideways like a painter's brush, and everything in its path, factories, hab blocks, people, dissolved into their component atoms. Thane watched through his scope as a fleeing family van touched the edge of the beam. One moment, 5 people. The next, empty air. "Emperor, preserve us," someone whispered behind him. But the Emperor wasn't here. Only the Necrons were here now. A second beam struck the eastern sectors, then a third, then dozens more, until the entire sky became a web of killing light that carved his world like a surgeon's scalpel. The temperature in the bunker dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Frost began forming on the windows as the Gauss bombardment stripped away Meridian's atmosphere in precise, calculated sections. "They're not trying to conquer us," Thane realized, his breath misting in the suddenly frigid air. "They're sterilizing us." Each beam moved with mechanical precision, following geometric patterns that spoke of intelligence both vast and utterly alien. No wasted motion, no mercy, no hesitation, just the methodical erasure of everything humanity had built on this world. Thane's Vox crackled with desperate transmissions from across the planet. Screams cut short, prayers interrupted, last words that would never be finished. The Gauss beams carved closer to the capital, closer to his bunker. Thane could see the mathematical precision in their approach now. They weren't firing randomly. They were following a pattern, a countdown, and his bunker was next in the sequence. But as the Green Death approached, something impossible happened in the distance. The beams stopped, every single one of them, frozen mid-sweep like a vid feed caught on pause. Then the tomb ships began to descend. Governor Vex's hands trembled as she reached for the Voxcaster. The smell of burning promethium filled the command bunker. Outside, the screams had stopped. That was worse than the screaming. Through the reinforced windows, she watched her world die. The Necron phalanxes moved like silver death across New Carthage's burning streets. No hurry, no emotion, just methodical extermination. "This is Governor Lydia Vex of New Carthage," she whispered into the transmitter. "If anyone receives this, if anyone still lives." Her aide, Marcus, pressed the recording rune with blood-slicked fingers. Half his face was gone, melted by Gauss fire during their retreat. The Necrons awakened 3 days ago. Tomb complexes beneath the northern mining districts. We thought they were archaeological sites. A distant explosion shook dust from the ceiling. The power flickered. 12 million souls called this world home. Now I watched them harvested like wheat. She closed her eyes, remembering the children in the evacuation centers. The mothers clutching infants. All gone now, reduced to constituent atoms by weapons older than human civilization. The Flayer virus spreads through their ranks. Some Necrons. They wear our skin now. They dance in the streets wearing the faces of our dead. Marcus made a choking sound. Blood bubbled from his lips. "Lord Commander, if this reaches you, do not send reinforcements. Do not come here. Cleanse this world from orbit. Burn it all." The bunker door began to glow orange. Something was cutting through. The Necron Overlord? It spoke to me, in perfect Gothic. It said this was mercy, that we would understand soon enough. Sparks showered as the door seal failed. I don't know what they mean. I don't know what comes after the killing. But Emperor, preserve us. I think the dying is just the beginning. The door fell inward with a crash that shook her bones. Silver light spilled into the bunker. The temperature dropped 20 degrees in seconds. Vex grabbed her last pistol with one hand, kept transmitting with the other. "Tell my daughter. Tell Elena her mother died human. Tell her the Necron immortal stepped through the breach. Its eye lenses burned like green stars. But it wasn't alone. Behind it walked a figure in tattered imperial uniform, Governor Matthias of the Zerion system, dead for 6 months. His skin hung loose on ancient bones. His eyes were empty sockets filled with emerald fire. "Hello, Lydia," Matthias said in a voice like grinding metal. "Ready to serve the Silent King?" But the real horror hadn't even begun. The air itself screamed as the Necron monolith tore through reality. Governor Thane pressed his face against the command bunker's reinforced glass. The massive obsidian pyramid hovered 3 kilometers above New Carthage's central district, its surface rippling like liquid metal. Green lightning cascaded from its apex. Each bolt struck with surgical precision. The cathedral, the PDF headquarters, the astropathic choir, one by one, humanity's pillars of resistance, simply ceased to exist. "Sir, we're receiving reports from all sectors." Communications Officer Vex's voice cracked. "The monolith, it's not just destroying buildings, it's harvesting them." Thane watched through his magnoculars as the pyramid's underside opened like a mechanical flower. Gravitational fields pulled debris upward, stone, steel, and screaming civilians alike. The harvested matter vanished into the monolith's core. "Dear Emperor," Thane whispered, "they're not just killing us, they're recycling us." Across the city, Necron forces moved with renewed purpose. The awakening phase was complete. Now came the harvest. Warrior phalanxes marched through residential districts, their Gauss flares reducing fleeing families to component atoms. The green energy didn't just kill, it unraveled molecular bonds, preparing organic matter for collection. Sister Superior Cassia led her remaining battle sisters through the undercity tunnels. The monolith's influence couldn't penetrate the ancient rockcrete here. Yet. "We have maybe an hour before they map these passages," she voxed to scattered resistance cells. "The monolith is learning our city's layout with every structure it consumes." Above them, the pyramid's resonant hum grew deeper, more harmonious. Other monoliths were awakening. Thane's auspex detected massive energy signatures rising from tomb complexes across the continent. The geometric precision was terrifying. 12 monoliths forming a perfect dodecagon around New Carthage. "They're not just harvesting our city," he realized. "They're preparing it for something else." The temperature in the bunker dropped 15 degrees. Frost formed on the viewports despite the sealed atmosphere. Vex's fingers trembled over her console. "Sir, I'm detecting massive energy buildup in all 12 monoliths. They're synchronizing." The harmonics shifted. 12 pyramid songs becoming one. Thane understood with horrible clarity. This wasn't conquest. This was construction. The Necrons weren't just taking their world. They were rebuilding it. Into what? He couldn't imagine. But as the monolith's combined song reached crescendo, reality itself began to bend. Then the first human screamed in a voice that wasn't entirely human anymore. Governor Thaddeus Vex stood in his command bunker, watching the last Vox transmission from Hive Primaris fade to static. 60 million souls, gone in 14 hours. The silence wasn't empty. It was full, pregnant with the weight of what had just happened. No screams, no explosions, no desperate final transmissions, just nothing. "Sir, we're receiving reports from the outer settlements," his aide whispered, her voice cracking. They're all going dark, one by one." Vex had governed Tertius Prime for 23 years. He'd seen orc raids, Tyranid splinter fleets, even a minor chaos incursion. But this was different. This was methodical. The Necrons weren't conquering Tertius Prime. They were erasing it. Outside the bunker's reinforced walls, the temperature had dropped 12 degrees in the past hour. The very air felt wrong. Thin, metallic, tasting of copper and ozone. "Governor," his communications officer called out. "We're getting something from Hive Secundus. It's not human." The transmission crackled through the speakers. Not words, not language as humans understood it. But somehow, impossibly, Vex understood. Submission, compliance, harvest. The Necrons weren't just killing the population. They were cataloging them, processing them, adding their biological distinctiveness to vast databases that had existed since before humanity crawled from the mud of ancient Terra. Every human on Tertius Prime was being measured, weighed, and found useful. "Sir, the astropathic choir is reporting severe psychic disturbance," another aide reported. "They say the warp around our system is quiet. Too quiet." Vex knew what that meant. The Necron's presence was creating a null zone in reality itself. No psychic communication, no warp travel, no escape. Tertius Prime had become an island, cut off from the rest of the Imperium. The bunker's lights flickered. Once, twice. Then the emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in hellish red. Movement detected on the surface. The sensor operator announced. "Massive formations. They're arranging themselves in geometric patterns around the remaining population centers." Vex walked to the tactical display. The Necron forces weren't advancing randomly. They were creating a perfect mathematical grid across his world's surface, turning his planet into a tomb. "How long until they reach us?" he asked. "At current speed. 6 hours, sir." Vex nodded. 6 hours to decide whether to die fighting or surrender his world to creatures that had been ancient when the Emperor was young. Then the bunker's main door began to glow with green light. Governor Maltheus stood before the planetary defense grid's master console. His fingers trembled over the activation runes. The choice was simple, horrifying, but simple. Activate the orbital defense platforms and watch them tear through his own cities, or let the Necrons complete their harvest unimpeded. 20 million souls versus the galaxy's future. The communications array crackled with desperate voices. Hive City Primus was already gone. Its 17 billion inhabitants reduced to screaming metal and bone. The Necron flare constructs had worked through the night. Their mechanical precision was art. Terrible, beautiful art. "Sir, we have confirmation," his aide whispered. "The Necron tomb ship is beginning translation protocols. They're preparing to leave." Maltheus felt his heart stop. Leave? With 20 million human souls trapped in their resurrection matrices? The Necrons weren't just killing. They were collecting, building something with human consciousness itself. His tactical display showed the truth in cold, blue light. The tomb ship's energy signature was unlike anything in Imperial records. It pulsed with organic rhythms, human rhythms. The harvested souls weren't dead. They were being woven into something new. "Governor," his aide's voice cracked, "the astropathic choir is detecting singing from inside the tomb ship." Singing, Maltheus closed his eyes. In the darkness behind his lids, he could almost hear it. 20 million voices raised in harmony. Beautiful, wrong, eternal. The Necrons had found something worse than death. They had found perfection. His finger hovered over the firing controls. The orbital platforms could cripple the tomb ship, trap it in Tertius Prime's gravity well. But the cost, every remaining city would burn. Every surviving human would die screaming. But the 20 million souls already taken might be saved, or they might suffer forever. "Sir, the tomb ship is powering its translation drive," the aide reported. 30 seconds to departure. Malthius thought of his daughter, safe on distant Terra. She would never know what choice he made here. The singing grew louder in his mind. 20 million voices calling to him across the void. Were they begging for rescue or warning him to let them go? His finger pressed down. The orbital platforms fired. But instead of targeting the tomb ship, every lance battery turned toward the planet's surface. Malthius hadn't chosen to save the harvested souls. He had chosen to join them. Sarah Martinez pressed her eye to the periscope, watching the fields of Tertius Prime stretch endlessly below. For 3 days, the wheat had grown in perfect silence. No birds, no insects, no wind through the grain, just endless golden stalks swaying to a rhythm that had nothing to do with weather. "Command, this is Recon 7, she whispered into her vox. "The harvest zones are wrong." The wheat moved like water, like breathing. Sarah adjusted the scope's focus. The grain wasn't grain anymore. Each stalk had become a metallic spire, its surface rippling with green energy that pulsed in perfect unison, a heartbeat made of light. "Recon 7, clarify wrong," came the static-filled response. Sarah watched a farmer emerge from his homestead below. Old Henrik, who'd worked these fields for 60 years. He walked toward the transformed wheat with the measured gait of a sleepwalker. His skin had turned the color of tarnished silver. The people. Sarah breathed. "They're harvesting themselves." Henrik reached the edge of the metallic field. Without hesitation, he stepped into the writhing grain. The stalks parted around him like curtains, revealing glimpses of machinery beneath. Vast conveyor. Systems stretching into darkness. Sarah's hands trembled on the scope controls. More figures emerged from farmhouses across the valley. Hundreds of them. Men, women, children, all walking with that same purposeful stride toward the waiting fields. All bearing that same silver sheen to their flesh. They're not being taken? Sarah realized, her voice barely audible. "They're volunteering." The transformed wheat began to sing, not with voices, but with harmonics that bypassed the years entirely. Sarah felt the melody in her bones, in the spaces between her thoughts. It spoke of rest after millennia of labor, of purpose beyond the brief flicker of mortal existence, of joining something eternal. Sarah's finger found the trigger of her lasgun. One shot would end this. One shot would spare her the choice that every human on Tertius Prime now faced. But the song was so beautiful, so logical, so peaceful. Her weapon clattered to the ground as silver began to bloom beneath her fingernails. Below in the valley, the last of the farmers disappeared into the metallic grain. The fields pulsed once, brilliantly, then fell still. Sarah stood and began walking toward the ladder. But something else was moving in the wheat now. Something that hadn't been human to begin with. The screaming stops. Tertius Prime falls silent. Not the silence of peace. The silence of completion. Commander Thane stands among the crystalline monuments that were once his soldiers. His breathing echoes in his helmet. Each exhale fogs the visor. Each inhale tastes of metal and defeat. The Necron overlord approaches. Its footsteps ring like funeral bells against obsidian streets. Green fire dances in hollow sockets where eyes once burned with mortal ambition. "Your species built cities on our tomb worlds," the ancient voice rasps. "You farmed our sacred grounds. You bred like vermin in our halls." Thane's hand trembles on his bolt pistol. Useless now. The weapon that carved through orc hordes and chaos spawn cannot scratch this living metal god. We gave you 65 million years, the Overlord continues. Time enough for entire species to rise and fall. Time enough for your sun to cool. We were patient. The crystalline statues gleam in the green light. Sergeant Martinez, Lieutenant Chen, Private Williams, barely 18 standard years, all transformed in the moment they thought they could fight gods. But patience has limits. The Overlord raises one skeletal hand. Thane feels the familiar tingling, the cellular disruption that precedes crystallization. His skin begins to harden. His blood slows to amber. You called this world home for 3,000 years, the Necron whispers. We called it home for 3 million. Thane's last thought crystallizes with his flesh. We never had a chance. The Overlord surveys his reclaimed domain. 60 billion humans reduced to decorative monuments. Their cities melted down for raw materials. Their orbital stations dismantled atom by atom. This is not conquest. This is housekeeping. The Necron fleet moves to the next system, the next tomb world, the next infestation of warm-blooded squatters. Across the galaxy, humanity builds colonies on dead worlds. They plant flags in alien soil. They call it manifest destiny, expansion, progress. They never ask who lived there first. In our own world, we demolish ancient sites for shopping malls. We build highways through sacred grounds. We call it development. We call it necessary. We never ask what we're disturbing. But what happens when the original owners wake up? When patience runs out? When the bill comes due for our cosmic trespassing? The Necrons remember everything. Every slight, every desecration, every footprint on their tomb worlds. And they're still waking up. Subscribe if you dare to witness what happens when humanity's expansion meets the galaxy's oldest grudge. The silence of Tertius Prime stretches across 10,000 years. No birds sing in the crystalline forests. No wind disturbs the geometric perfection of what were once human cities. The air tastes of ozone and ancient metal. Governor Castellan's descendants never came. The Necron Overlord stands where the palace once burned, his emerald eyes scanning horizons that no longer change. Time moves differently when you are deathless. Seasons blur into centuries, centuries collapse into moments. He remembers the taste of fear in human voices. The biotransference protocols completed their work flawlessly. Every human on Tertius Prime sleeps now in bodies of living metal, their consciousness preserved in quantum matrices. They dream of flesh they will never feel again. The Overlord told them it was salvation. Sometimes, in the deep tomb cities, you can hear them weeping. Digital tears that fall like silver rain through neural networks spanning continents. They remember their children's laughter. They remember the warmth of sunlight on skin. They remember being human. The galaxy turns. Empires rise and crumble to dust. But Tertius Prime endures, a monument to the Necrons' greatest victory. Not conquest, conversion. Every awakened human became a willing servant of the Silent King. They patrol the crystal gardens now, these metal angels with human souls. Their weapons hum with energies that could crack moons. Their eyes burn with the cold fire of stars. But in their quantum dreams, they still reach for lovers who turned to ash 60 million years ago. The Overlord calls this mercy. He preserved them after all. Every memory, every emotion, every scream of realization when they understood what they had become. Immortality was the gift. Servitude was simply the price. Across the galaxy, other worlds wake to the green glow of Necron tomb ships. The pattern repeats. Resistance, conversion, silence. Humanity's greatest fear was never extinction. It was transformation into something that remembers being human, but can never be human again. The Overlord watches the stars wheel overhead, counting the worlds yet to be awakened. In our own time, we speak of digital immortality, of uploading consciousness, of transcending flesh. We call it progress. But what happens when the architects of our transcendence see us not as partners, but as raw material? When salvation becomes indistinguishable from damnation? The Necrons know the answer. Every click is a choice. Every view, a glimpse into humanity's possible futures.